Um, right. Welcome, everyone. So my name is Yuri. I hope we can all learn something useful today. I don't know how you ended up in this talk, but let's make the best of it, right? About me, I'm Yuri. I just work at Klarna. Currently working in a browser, basically building a browser. I do Android since 16, and yeah, that's you can find me online on those links. Right now, so you probably know what this talk is supposed to be, right? About it's about Gradle and how to build Gradle plugins. I think everybody, when they start off with Android development, they kind of stumble upon these Gradle files, and you kind of stuck with it because you don't know exactly what they do, but you have to sort your way through it and find out how to work with it. And you end up copying and pasting a lot of code, right? Stack Overflow and all that. But eventually you kind of learn what's happening, and then you start creating maybe custom tasks, extracting logic to a file, whatnot. But whenever you start a new project, even if you work at a previous company and you did some kind of, I don't know, if you did some kind of custom stuff there, you kind of have to copy paste that code, right? And as you learn more about Gradle, the next logical step from creating custom tasks would be to extract the logic into a plugin, right? Because when you have a plugin and you publish a plugin, you can really reuse the code without having to copy paste and all that. So that's what this talk about, right? So how to get the most out of these Gradle plugins. Now, as I said, so this is basically a quick starter guide on how to approach building Gradle plugins. What this talk is not about is this is not an exhaustive Gradle API tutorial, right? So the Gradle API, you probably know it's huge. There's tons of stuff there. I'm not going to go into the details of everything, of every single API. There's a bunch of ways to do stuff. I'm going to follow one way and show you some ways, not just single one, but just bear with me. Also, I'm not an expert, right? I don't work for Gradle. I'm just a guy that stumbled upon these APIs and learned my way through it, and I'm just going to share how you can use that. Okay, now enough of that. So just a little bit of background story. If you're wondering how we ended up here with this kind of Gradle, I mean, everybody works with Android. Shouldn't be that the main thing. So there's this idea that I just said, like copy-pasting stuff. So I created this task the other day to generate Mermaid. I don't know if you know Mermaid.js. It's just this code to graph generator. So you type in code and you get some diagrams, basically. So I written a task that turns your Gradle project into a graph. And that was just a task. So I ended up copying and pasting this task over and over, and I decided to give it a try to the Gradle plugin APIs. So I created this library, I published this library, module graph thing, and I used that. I extracted the logic from this task into this plugin. So I could finally replace that custom task on my projects. Right, so let's go over for Gradle plugin overview, just the very basics of it. So what is a Gradle plugin, right? So it's an add-on to your build. You can add custom logic to your build just by applying this with the Gradle plugin DSL. So for instance, you're probably familiar with that. This is the Android application plugin, right? So when you apply this plugin to a project, a bunch of things happen. So one of the things that happens, like there's two ways to do that. So when you apply a plugin, there's two ways that it impacts your project. One of the ways is that it performs some behavior when the plugin is applied. So when you apply a plugin, for instance, with the Android Gradle plugin, Android application plugin, you get these source sets, like the Android tasks, for instance, your build understand that you can run, you can place tasks, Android tasks there, and they work. So this happens when you apply the plugin, right? So during the configuration phase. The other way is that it adds, when you apply a plugin, it will add additional tasks to your build, right? So for instance, when you apply this Android plugin, you get these tasks, right? Assemble, build. These are specific tasks that were enabled by the plugin. So there's this idea that I came up with of this Gradle plugin puzzle, right? So bear with me. So it's like, to build a plugin, there's a bunch of things you have to understand and to fit them together, right? So they kind of look like a puzzle, right? So when you break it apart, you kind of have these 6 steps, basically. So let's go over each one of them, and by the end of it, you probably should understand how it works, what you have to do to get a Gradle plugin working, right? So first of all, setup, right? This is what you need to do to configure a Gradle plugin on your project. So just so you have, so you understand, Gradle plugin project, if you type in tree on the command line, it will look kind of like this. And if you take a look at it, this is kind of the same of an Android application, right? So nothing that different there. On the build configuration file, then, you have some changes. You have to apply this Java Gradle plugin. So this is a plugin for building plugins, right? It gets to that level. So you apply this plugin and add these dependencies, the Gradle API dependencies. This is all from Gradle. And then you're all set, because from this Java Gradle plugin, you get this configuration called this DSL called Gradle plugin. So with that, you can define your plugin, right? So you basically have to define a name, an ID, and version, description, display. All that metadata is used to build your plugin, right? So one of the things you have to focus here is this implementation class. This is kind of weird, right? So here you define the entry point of the plugin. We'll get back to this one in a short. So that was the setup. So that easy. So next step, implementation. So let's see. These are the basic building blocks for a Gradle plugin. You have the plugin, extension, and task. So typically when you build a Gradle plugin, this is what you have to do to implement. So let's start from the extension. The extension, you can just think of that as an data object. You're basically you're going to use that to pass configuration down to the plugin, to configure the plugin. So if you want to change the behavior, that's where you enable that. So this is how you can implement one. It's a very simple example. This has this. Let's go over each step first. So first of all, it needs to be an abstract class. So the reason is that you're going to define this class, and when you compile the plugin, Gradle is going to do a bunch of stuff there to configure it. So that's why it needs to be abstract, so Gradle can expand on it. So the other thing you have to do is you have to use this inject annotation and pass in a project. And with the project, you get to define your properties. So you have to use this Gradle API dance. You have to use project object. This is how you declare, basically. Just something you have to do, right? This is what Gradle decided to go with. And yeah, basically here, this is a Boolean property I'm defining. Should do something, right? So this is something that the user can configure on the plugin. After that, it's basically that. So you configure an extension, right? The next step is the task. So you have your extension. Now you can define a task to encapsulate an action. So tasks are the things that actually do stuff on the plugin. So they basically do the side effects, you know, like they create the stuff. The logic is actually happening most of the times in the task. So this is how you define your class or your task class. Same idea, also an abstract class. You have to, but this one you have to extend the full class. There are other kind of tasks, but this example that I'm going is really like a basic example. But so you just extend the default class, and then you have to define inputs, because the idea is that the tasks, just like a function, it has inputs and outputs, right? And Gradle goes it does a lot of effort to try to enable cache. So if you want to cache a task, you need to define the inputs and outputs. This one, we're going for a simple one. So this is just, we just have an input. And the input is just this property to like a Boolean property. Should do something. The other thing you have to know is you have to add this annotation to the method that actually has the logic that's what actually is going to run on when the task is run. Right? So you just annotate a method. The method could be named anything. So mine is just named execute, and annotate it. And here I can use this property. So I use this should do something .get, because that's a property. When you call get, it's lazily evaluated. So you call get to evaluate it. And then you can do your logic, right? So we have the extension. Now we have the task. So basically use the extension to configure the task. And finally, we have the plugin, which is the actual entry point, right? So to just, so you guys can remember, this is where we define it. So this plugin class has to be in the exact same place that you define here. So this needs to be the class path, right? So it's our entry point, like I said, and this is going to define what happens when the plugin gets applied. Basically, to define a plugin, you have to extend the plugin class and override this apply method. So you can think of that this is going to run exactly when you apply the plugin. So if you understand a little bit of Gradle, there's some phases, and there's one that's called configuration phase. So this happens during the configuration phase, right? So you apply the plugin, so this thing is already happening. So ideally, you don't want to do a lot of heavy work here. It should be something that it's going to happen a lot. Every time you configure a project, this is going to run. So you shouldn't do a lot of logic here, or nothing that is taxing on performance, on the build performance, right? Right, so this is your plugin. You just defined it. Now, what else? You have to, what do you do with those tasks and those extensions, right? So you have to use the API, the plugin API to configure them. First of all, you can define the extension here. So you call project extensions create. This is also the way Gradle decided to go with. So you use the class, you use these parameters. This string there, my plugin config, this can be anything. So this is going to be the code that's in the DSL, on the Gradle DSL. For instance, the Android plugin. So when you type it in like Android and curly braces, that Android is an extension that was configured, you know, like this. Maybe here they written Android. And that's it. That's how you define the extension. Now that you get the extension, you can get the properties out of it. So if the user passes in the configuration, you can get it back right here. Right here, what I'm doing is I'm registering a task. So you also do this dance, like project task, register, and then you define the name of the task that's going to be available for the users. So here I'm defining like my plugin task, just that. And there's this lambda, and you get this your task when it's registered. You get to configure it using this the extension. So I'm using the extension to pass an input to the task. That's the whole dance you have to do. Like this is kind of required, you know. Like not much I can say about it. Okay, so what you got here until now is that we have defined an extension. There's a property, there's a Boolean that we're passing through it, and that property is passed to the task as an input, right? So that's where we're at. And now for testing. This is a topic that most people have never seen in Gradle, like because, I don't know, people don't do that, like in their normal day jobs. But yeah, testing, we're pros, right? So to do tests, you you can do a little bit of setup if you want to use, for instance, like JUnit 5. So I'm just going to show it here real quick. So this is the configuration we had before, right, up until now. So what you need to do, you just define these other dependencies for JUnit. So JUnit 5 engine, JUnit 5 API, and you configure the tasks to use JUnit platform, right? So that's it. And you have JUnit 5 configured for Gradle, and you can run tasks with that. You can, after this configuration, you can just add your tasks here. So there's your source folder, there's tasks, just normal. And now you need to know that Gradle enables two types of tasks. So we have both unit tasks and what they call functional tasks. So these functional tasks are basically integration tasks that you can write with Gradle. So it's the same idea, right? So let's go over them. Like unit tasks with the project builder. These allow you to run real quick tasks real fast, so you can validate some basic logic tested in isolation. And it kind of looks like this. So if you want to write a task, for instance, to detect, to validate that your task is enabled, it was added to the build when the plugin is applied, that's how you do it. So you define a class, annotate it. You use the project builder API to get a project. Then you apply your plugin. You can see like I'm using strings there because I defined it as a string, so it can basically be anything. So I apply the plugin, and I'm just on the third line. I'm just verifying if the task is available to that project when the plugin is applied. So sanity check, right? So, but we can do that real quick with these unit tests and this API. The other thing we have, so these are fast and lightweight. They're great for sanity tasks, as I said, and they are built in with the Gradle API, the basic Gradle API. The other one we have is this Gradle runner. It comes on this task kit package, and they're useful for functional tasks. So these functional tasks, the idea is that they're going to be just like integration tasks. It's like you really get a Gradle build to play with. To enable that, you just need to add this dependency, task implementation. So you Gradle task kit, and that's it. So writing a task for that, this is an example of the setup of this task. So the interesting part when setting this up is that you literally create a project, a Gradle project in your task file. Right here, for instance, I'm defining like a project directory. I'm using this temp dir annotation, which basically tears down everything that's inside this folder when the tests are done. So just know that. So everything I put in this folder is gonna be cleaned up by the end of the test, and I do that for every test, right? So just so we have a clean slate every time we start. And right, so I'm defining a settings file, I'm defining a build file, and yeah, that's the annotation that I told you about. This is the step before each. So I'm just gonna collapse that so if everything fits on the screen. And this is the whole task. So let's go over every single one. I hope it's big enough. But okay, so the settings file. It's literally like I had the settings.gradle KTS file, and I'm writing to this file. So I just define a name using the normal Gradle API, just like you normally use. So root project.name, example, it just could be anything. On the build file, I'm doing the same as if I was in a Gradle build file. So I'm calling the plugins block, defining as a Java project. Could be Kotlin. Kotlin also uses Java, the Java plugin anyway. But so I define this ID. This is the ID of my plugin, right? Which I defined on that other slide. So I'm applying my plugin, and I'm also using my configuration. So my plugin config should do something .set.true, right? So I'm basically on the task. I'm just like if I had a normal build file, and I'm using the nice Kotlin syntax anyway. And finally, you can run this build, this task actually. So you use the Gradle run API, so Gradle run.create, then you tell it where the project is located, and then you pass in an argument. In this case, I'm telling it to run my plugin task. And what I expect to see after I run it, I expect it to print did something, because that's what our plugin does so far. So I'm just checking if that is printed by the end of this, when this task is run. So really, really basic. So when to use one on another, like I told you, if you really want to test in isolation, you probably should use the project builder API. Otherwise, you can use TaskKit to have like a full integration task with Gradle. You can even apply other plugins there. Right. So this is the testing phase. Now, for the publishing part, let's see. This is how you share the plugin, right? So right up until now, you're in isolation working your plugin, but you want to have this plugin somewhere, right? That's the whole point. And publishing is the part that you need to enable that, right? So setting up, this used to be way harder back in the day. Now they have this official plugin, publish plugin. My God. You can just apply that to your project. And as soon as you have this, if you run on your project Gradle.myPlugin tasks, these tasks get added. So you have the plugin portal tasks. This, I'm not sure if everybody is aware of that, but there's this plugin portal, Gradle plugin portal, which is a website from Gradle. You can publish plugins there for free. Like, you don't need to have your own Maven, blah, blah, do all that setup. This is way more streamlined. It makes it a lot easier to publish. But you can also use these other tasks, and particularly this one, publish to Maven local, right? So with this one, you don't need to set up anything. You can just publish to your own machine. And not sure if everybody is aware of that, but Gradle enables you to. There's a folder on your computer where Gradle stores some of his stuff. And when you run this task, when you run my publish to Maven local, if you cd, if you change directory into this file, it's going to be here at your home.m2.repository and your whole plugin path name and version. And when you run this task, you're going to have these files, right? So Java docs, sources, jar, module, all that. And yeah, so if you just built the plugin, that basic stuff up until now, and you run this task, this is going to be published locally to your machine. Now you need to get that to another project so you can finally use it, right? Super boring, but yeah, we're getting there. Right, so this is the consuming part. So navigate again to another project. You can create another project to test that. So you have a settings.gradle.kts file, right? And you have this plugin management configuration with repositories where usually you get your plugins from. So what you need to do here to use that plugin that was published locally is just to add the Maven local here. So now everything that's available that's on that folder is also available to this project. So you can consume that. So you can navigate to your sample build.gradle.kts, and you can apply your plugin now. So finally, we're applying the plugin. And finally, we can run it. So how to check if this thing is on? If you're on Android Studio or IntelliJ IDEA, you can sync, and you also see this. Otherwise, you can, from the command line, you can just type Gradle, and you will configure the project. So if you type Gradle, you should see this message, because that's what we added when we created the plugin, right? So we had just this message. So whenever the plugin is configured, this message is gonna be printed, right? Because that's what we did. Yeah, remember this? That's the reason. So now for the configuration part, after applying the plugin, you can also configure it with the extension that you define. So the idea is that you can open this block, this configuration. Finally. Okay, so if you run Gradle.myPluginTask, you should see this. Hey, that's it. Because of this, right? Because we had this kind of logic in the execute method. And that's it, right? Did something. You may be thinking, right? All this for that. Yeah, actually, yeah. But that's just a starting point, right? That's just where how things start. This is the most basic thing you can do for defining a plugin. But this actually wraps up the whole puzzle, and things fit together. Or do they? Right, so I'm gonna try to do a live demo just for the sake of it. And yeah, okay. Right, so I said that I built this plugin the other day, and this is it, this is the project. I'm just gonna show you, because these very basic steps, with that you can do a lot. It's not all, like I said, this is not the whole API. There's a lot more you should know if you're gonna build big stuff or more complex stuff, like how to use the Gradle task cache or incremental builds, how to support that. But the very basic is that, and with this you can already do some interesting stuff. For instance, this plugin that I did, I'm just gonna go over it. So the configuration is basically what I showed you guys. The only extra thing is that I'm using Kotlin serialization, but whatever. Yeah, all the same. So this is the configuration part, right? So Gradle plugin, blah blah. I'm getting properties from Gradle property file here. So I'm just filling it in. Nothing much to it. This part. What else? I can show you what the plugin looks like. Exactly. It's the same. So I just have an extension. Let's go over to the extension class, right? So this is the, oops. This is the extension class. Bunch of properties, just defining properties. One thing you should know, these properties need to be serializable for the cache thing to work, because Gradle needs to output that to a file and needs to be serializable because of that. Trivia. This is where I register the task, so I only have this single task. So I'm passing back the properties there. And also here, I'm doing something that's not just that basic. This is a method, blah, blah. This is related to the logic of my project, right? So this is very specific to my project. But basically, I'm passing in the configurations to the task. And this is the task. So a bunch of configurations too. And here we have the method, so the execution part. So just run my logic here, log any exception, right? So this is the task, the extension, and the plugin. What else? We also have tests. So these are the unit tests, basic ones. I can even try to run them. Let's see how that goes. Yo, I knew it. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, getting warnings because, yeah, live demos. If the module graph, like the configuration, the extensions are being added, or I'm checking if when I pass the parameters, the tasks get the right parameters, right? So like I said, basic unit tests, isolated. And you also have the functional ones. That's right. Yeah. So these, like you saw that those ran super fast, and these are not that fast. You see 700 milliseconds, yeah. But they are full-fledged integration tests, actually. And in these ones, I go into much more complicated setups, like sub-projects. You can have sub-projects, you can have everything. Let me just scroll to the top here to show you guys. Yeah, so I have a bunch of projects set up in and whatnot, and validate the output. And it all works with these integration tests. And yeah, what else we got? Those were tests. Right. The other thing is consuming the plugin. So here, what I'm doing is I have a project set up in the same project structure. So this is where I put the. You can see on this side here. This is where I put the plugin, and right next to it, I have a sample project that's using this plugin. So here, I don't even have to publish and consume like I showed you guys. I can do all in the same place. So like it's like this folder, this project here is directly using this one. This is a different setup, but the idea is that I can basically apply the plugin and configure it like I showed you guys, like passing the configuration, and the task gets added to it, and I can run the tasks. And yeah, if you're curious to what that task does, I'm here at the sample project, a README file, right? So that task creates this, and when I render this, I get this. Yeah, and that's about it. Like the whole idea, like you can configure it. You can configure that with the plugin, and yeah, that's about it. Let me get back to the slides. Wait. Yes. Right, so where to go from here? You can check the source code of that plugin if you want. There's some very interesting articles that I stumbled upon while researching this. These go much more in-depth into this topic, and it covers like the more complicated scenarios. But yeah, you can check that, and that's it. Thanks.